Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at habits, and you've given us quite a bit from Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit. So I guess let's just jump right in.
Yeah, this should be fun. Duhigg, he really goes deep, like, how do habits form? How do they change? What do they mean for, us, people, companies, even, whole societies?
Well, he starts out with this thing, the habit loop, and it sounds simple, but, is it?
I mean, I guess so, at first.
Yeah.
He says it's got three parts: cue, routine, reward. Picture it this way. You walk into a dark room, right? That's your cue. And you flip a light switch, that's the routine, and boom, you can see that's the reward.
So is our brain kind of just, looking for these patterns all the time? Everywhere?
Yeah, pretty much. It's all about efficiency, right? Our brains, they want to be efficient. There's this part called the basal ganglia. It's like the king of shortcuts. It just wants to automate all the things we do over and over so you don't have to think about it every time. Can you imagine having to relearn how to tie your shoes every single morning?
Oh, man, I know. What a waste of time. But wait, if it's all about being efficient, then what about bad habits? Those don't seem very efficient.
Well, now it gets interesting. Duhigg, he says, habits never really go away. They just get hardwired into our brains. And he uses this example of this guy, Eugene Pauly, who had really bad memory loss. He couldn't make new memories, but he could still do all these habits, like walking around the block or eating breakfast, multiple times even. He would just forget he did it.
So it's they're still there, those pathways in our brains, just hiding, waiting to get triggered again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just shows you breaking a bad habit, it isn't just about willpower, right?
Yeah.
You got to understand those triggers, and then you can switch them out with something better.
Rewiring those pathways.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of leads us to what he calls keystone habits. So these habits that can kick off a whole chain reaction, changing other parts of your life too, like dominoes, right? You knock over that first one and then boom.
So instead of changing everything at once, you just focus on this one key habit. But can you really do that?
Well, he uses this really cool example. There's this woman, Lisa, who was totally determined to quit smoking. She wanted to travel across the Egyptian desert. But she realized smoking, that was holding her back from everything else she wanted.
So she decided to tackle that first, huh?
Yep. And get this, quitting smoking, that was the key. It totally changed her whole life. She lost weight, she went back to school, bought a house, even got engaged.
Wow. But why was quitting smoking so powerful? I mean, was it just willpower? Or was there something else going on?
Well, researchers, they actually looked at Lisa's brain, right? And they found out her new habits, they were literally taking over. The old ones, the neural activity, it didn't go away, but it was crowded out, by these stronger new urges.
So creating a traffic jam in the brain, redirecting the flow of those impulses is kind of a cool image.
Right. It just shows you how our brains are always adapting, rewiring themselves based on what we do.
Yeah.
Even habits that are super ingrained, they can change. You just got to focus. You got to have the right strategy.
That reminds me of that story about that army major in Kufa, right? Iraq. With him, it wasn't willpower either. It was about figuring out his soldiers' habits.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example. This major, he totally changed how things worked in his unit. I mean, he understood everything was driven by habits, from how they slept to how they handles crowds. And if you could get those habits right, you could achieve anything.
So it's shifting from being reactive to proactive, understanding the why behind what people do. That's a pretty good lesson for anyone, right? Not just in the military.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, whether you're leading a team, a company, or even just yourself, understanding habits, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
It really is. It's it's kind of wild when you think about it, right? How much success hinges on these little things we do, these automatic behaviors.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think all those habits we have that we just do, without even realizing it.
And that kind of brings us to this other big thing Duhigg talks about, belief in community. It's one thing to understand the habit loop, but actually changing, that's a whole other ballgame.
So it takes more than just willpower, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, believing you can change is huge, right? But, it's usually not enough just by itself. He uses this example of Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. It works, not just because of those 12 steps, but because it creates this whole community, People, they find strength in each other. They understand each other's struggles.
So it's about having this structure, this roadmap, but also having people supporting you along the way.
Exactly. It's about trading in those old habits, the bad ones for new ones, good ones,
Ah.
that are all about like recovery and belonging. Right.
It's kind of like Tony Dungy, the NFL coach, right, with his teams. Like, it wasn't just about plays and drills. It was about, like, this whole culture of, like, belief and trust.
Oh, yeah, that's a great connection.
Yeah.
Dungy, he really got it. You know, habits, they make or break a team. So he focused on making his players believe they could win. And he created this atmosphere of, like, you know, trust and support.
And, I mean, both the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Indianapolis Colts, they saw huge success under him.
It really shows you, like, understanding habits. It's bigger than just one person. You know, it can transform, like, organizations, communities, whole societies even.
Okay, so speaking of transforming, I'm curious about this idea of small wins that Duhigg talks about. Is it really possible to achieve big goals just by, like, focusing on tiny changes? It sounds almost too good to be true.
I know, right? It might sound a little weird, but Duhigg, he makes a really good case. He's the example of Michael Phelps and his coach. They were all about, like, perfection, right?
Yep.
And every little thing, his stroke, his turns, everything.
So it wasn't about, like, winning Olympic gold right away. It was about, like, mastering, like, all the small stuff first.
Yeah, exactly. Each, like, little improvement, each quote, win, it built momentum, gave him confidence, and in the end, it all contributed to, like, his crazy success, you know?
It makes you wonder, like, what are some small wins that people could focus on in their own lives, right? I mean, not all, like, Olympic athletes or anything.
That's a really good question. It could be, like, super simple stuff, like going for a walk every day for a week, or, like, you know, drinking an extra glass of water each morning.
So it's about, like, breaking down, like, the big scary goals into, like, smaller, more manageable steps,
Right.
and then, like, celebrating those little victories.
That's it. And Duhigg, he talks about this guy, Paul O'Neill. He's the CEO of Alcoa. And when he took over, you know what he did? He made worker safety his top priority.
No, I'm guessing people probably thought that was a pretty weird thing for a CEO to focus on, right?
You're telling me most people were like, huh, what does that have to do with anything? But O'Neill, he understood, you know, he got it. Keystone habits, remember?
He saw, like, worker safety as this, like, domino, right? This thing that would set off a whole chain of changes.
Precisely. And that's exactly what happened. Costs went down, quality went up, and productivity, it just shot through the roof. All because they focused on building this culture of safety, one small win at a time.
It's pretty amazing, right? How these tiny changes, they can have, like, such a huge impact.
It really is. And it just shows you sometimes the best way to make, like, these massive changes is to start small, you know?
So we've talked about how habits work for, like, individuals and in companies and even, like, achieving goals. But what about social movements? Like, can habits really drive, like, widespread change, like revolution?
Absolutely. Think about the Montgomery bus boycott.
Yeah.
It all started with one woman, Rosa Parks, refusing to give up her seat.
Yeah.
But what turned that into, like, a whole movement?
Like, it had to be more than just, like, one person's courage, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the boycott, it succeeded because of social habits.
Yeah.
It started with Rosa Parks' close friends, you know, and the Women's Political Council. They spread the word, organized everything. But then it got even bigger through these weaker ties, you know, like the broader community, everyone coming together.
So it was about, like, using both, like, those strong ties and those weaker ties to create this network.
Exactly. And as more and more people joined, they started to see themselves differently.
Yeah.
You know, they went from being followers to, like, leaders. They took ownership and they became, like, self-directed.
It's like those social habits, they transform them from, like, passengers on the bus to drivers of the movement.
That's a great way to put it. And it reminds me of this example Duhigg uses about Rick Warren. He's a church pastor.
Yeah.
And he used, like, a similar approach to grow his congregation.
So he was focused on, like, building community, right? Not just a church building.
Yeah, exactly. He tapped into, like, the power of those social habits, right? By creating these small groups that met in people's homes.
So it wasn't just about, like, showing up on Sunday. It was about, like, integrating faith into, like, everyday life.
Exactly. He made church like a habit, you know, something people did naturally because of their connections and their sense of belonging.
And it worked, right? His church, it grew into this huge community. It's like proof that those social habits, they can create real lasting change.
Yeah, totally. It shows how movements, they gain momentum when people feel like they're a part of something, you know, when they develop these new habits that lead them toward this shared goal.
Okay, so All this is fascinating, but it also makes you wonder, right? Like about the potential for manipulation. Like if habits are so powerful, can they be used to influence people in bad ways, in unethical ways?
Yeah, that's a super important question. And Duhigg, he talks about it. He doesn't shy away from the ethical side of things.
He uses that story about Target, right? Where they use data to figure out like which customers were pregnant.
Oh yeah. That one's a little creepy, right? So Target, they figured out pregnant women and new parents, those are like gold to retailers. I mean, think about it. They're tired, they're overwhelmed, and they just want anything that'll make life easier.
Yeah. So Target saw a chance to kind of like cash in on that, huh?
Well, I mean, in a way, it seemed like a good thing for everyone. Target gets loyal customers, parents get the stuff they need. But it does make you think, right? Like, how much information should companies have? And how should they use it?
Like, it is a little creepy when, like, a company knows you're pregnant before. Like, your own family does, right?
I know, right? And it's not just Target. Marketers, businesses, they're always using these sneaky little tactics to, like, tap into our habits, to make us want their stuff, make it seem familiar.
Those targeted ads online, right, makes you think twice about them.
Exactly. It just shows you we got to be aware of these tactics, right? And make our own choices. Like, what do we buy? Who are we letting influence us?
It's like this constant battle, right, between our habits and our free will.
And speaking of unconscious stuff, Duhigg, he uses this really chilling story to show how powerful habits can be, even the ones we're not like aware of. It's about Brian Thomas, who killed his wife during a sleep terror.
Oh, that's terrifying. So he wasn't like consciously doing it.
Nope, not at all. During sleep terrors, the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that makes decisions, is like shut down.
Yeah.
So Thomas was basically acting out this deeply ingrained habit, like a fight or flight response triggered by the terror, but he had no control over it.
It makes you think, like if our habits can be so powerful that we do things we're not even aware of, what does that mean for like personal responsibility?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I mean, with Thomas, experts said he was asleep during the whole thing, and the jury, they found him not guilty. But it does make you wonder, right? Like, how much control do we really have over what we do?
It's a good reminder, though. Habits, they're powerful, for good or for bad.
And that brings us to our last topic. Willpower and self-control. We all know that feeling, right? Like wanting to do something, but knowing we shouldn't.
Like trying to resist that second piece of cake. It's amazing how strong those cravings can be.
It turns out willpower is a lot like a muscle. You can strengthen it, but you can also like overwork it.
So it's like we only have a certain amount of willpower each day.
It does seem that way. Think of it like this. If you spend the whole day like resisting temptation, you're going to have less willpower later on to make like the healthy choices.
That makes sense. So how do we like build up our willpower? Like, is there anything we can do to make it easier to resist those temptations?
Oh yeah, there are. Studies show that like exercise and planning, they can actually boost your self-control.
Really? Like working out can make it easier to say no to like late night snacks? That's good to know.
I know, right? Sounds kind of crazy. But think about it. Exercise, it makes us more disciplined.
Yeah.
It teaches us to like push through discomfort. And planning, it helps us like anticipate stuff so we can make decisions in advance when our willpower is stronger.
It's like setting ourselves up for success instead of just relying on like willpower alone, right?
You got it. Duhigg, he tells this story about Travis, the Starbucks barista, who like totally turned his life around thanks to their training program.
What was so special about Starbucks training?
Well, they understood willpower. It's key to good customer service.
Yeah.
Right. So they knew their employees would be dealing with like demanding customers, stressful situations, and they wanted them to be able to stay like calm and positive.
So they basically train willpower as like a job skill.
That's a great way to put it. They taught employees how to like handle tough situations, how to stay calm, even when things were like crazy. They even had like scripts for dealing with like the trickiest customers.
So instead of just hoping their employees had enough willpower, they actually gave them like tools, right, to help them succeed.
Exactly. And it worked. Travis, he did great. He learned how to manage his emotions. He became a hard worker, and he like totally transformed his life.
It's pretty inspiring, right, to see a company like intentionally create a culture that encourages good habits.
It really is. It shows that willpower, it's not just something you're like born with. It's something you can learn, you can get better at.
But I'm guessing it's not that easy for everyone, right, to develop those willpower habits. What about people who struggle with like addiction?
That's a really, really good point. Duhigg, he talks about Angie Bachman. She was a compulsive gambler. And even though she knew like the risks, what it was doing to her, she couldn't stop.
So even though she knew it was hurting her, she just couldn't resist it.
Yeah. And her story, it just shows how complicated this whole like personal responsibility thing is, especially when it comes to addiction. I mean, willpower is important, but you got to understand, addiction, it can like hijack your brain. It messes with the reward system, and it makes it so hard to break free.
Duhigg talks about a study that showed like how gamblers, they react differently to like almost winning compared to people who don't gamble.
Yeah. For them, almost winning, it feels like actually winning. It triggers that same like excitement, that same rush. It shows that addiction, it's not just about lacking willpower. It's like this whole mix of biology, psychology, or environment, everything.
So it's not as simple as just like trying harder, right? It's about understanding like how addiction works and getting help, getting support.
Exactly. Personal responsibility is important, but sometimes you need more than that. Sometimes you need like a whole team to help you beat addiction.
We've talked about a lot today, like how habits form, the power of belief and community, willpower, even like the ethics of changing habits.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, right?
What stands out to you from all this? What's like the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this?
I think for me, the big thing is like habits, they're powerful, but they don't like control us. We can change them.
That's good to hear. But like where do you even like start? It all sounds so complicated.
Where Duhigg, he gives us this framework, right? It all comes back to the habit loop. Remember, cue, routine, reward.
Right. So it's like we got to be like detectives or something. We got to find like the culprit, the habit we want to change.
Exactly. And then you got to like gather clues. Like, when does it happen? Where? What triggers it? What's the real payoff? What's the reward that's like driving it?
Okay, so like if I'm always reaching for like the chips in the afternoon, I got to figure out like why. Right? Am I bored, stressed, or am I actually like hungry?
Exactly. Once you know like what's going on, then you can start like trying out different rewards. See if you can like satisfy that craving in a better way.
Like Duhigg talks about like swapping out the routine, right? So instead of like chips, maybe I go for a walk or like call a friend.
Yeah. The key is like pay attention. See how you feel after you try something different. Does it like actually work? Does it satisfy that same craving? If not, try something else. Might take a few tries,
Like trying on different hats until you find one that fits.
Yeah, exactly. And once you've figured out that reward, then you can like make a plan. Yeah. He calls them implementation intentions. It's basically just deciding like, okay, when this happens, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
You outline the new routine, the one that'll get you to that good reward.
So instead of just saying like, I'm going to stop eating chips, I'd say like, okay, when I feel that urge at like 3 p.m., I'm going to go for a 15-minute walk and listen to my favorite podcast.
There you go. That's it. It's like having a roadmap, right? Instead of just like wandering around hoping you'll find your way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And Duhigg, he actually used this whole framework to change his own habit. He used to like buy a cookie every afternoon, and he broke that habit using this method.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It just shows you it works, Even those like really ingrained habits, we can change them. It just takes like effort and a good plan.
I think that's a really good message for our listeners.
Oh yeah. And remember, change, it doesn't happen overnight. You got to be patient, you got to celebrate those small wins. Yeah. And you got to like keep trying things until you find what works for you.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. I mean, it really shows you we have a lot of control over our own lives.
Yeah.
Even if it's through these small everyday things.
So, if you could leave our listener with just one thought, what would it be?
I guess I'd say believe in yourself. Believe you can change. Believe that those small wins, they can lead to big things. And believe that you have the power to create the life you want, one habit at a time.
That's a great message. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful, insightful.
It's my pleasure.
And remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into this amazing world of knowledge.